So today we're going to talk about how the changing media formats impact credibility and drive consumer action. So conventional wisdom still persists that advertising is not as powerful as editorial content, and you can see that that's not just some average Joe saying that, but Forbes and some other notable authors have been recently condoning that point of view. The assumption that underpins this thinking is that journalists serve as gatekeepers, and when they choose to write about something, that automatically gives it some third-party endorsement, and that third-party endorsement is more credible than paid advertising because the journalist is seen to be objective, and that the journalist's work goes through an editorial screening. The research to date on this topic of editorial versus advertising and the credibility and effectiveness of it is quite rich, going back to the early 90s, about 25 years. These here are the 6 most important papers that we felt addressed this issue, although there's many of them, and you can see one of them is by Stacks and Michelson, who are here in this room today. The key findings from this research that Julie and I thought were important to the question that we want to address is that, number one, most of the research that's been conducted in the past has been among students and not among the general population. The importance of the topic or product involvement seems to be very important, and that supports persuasion theory, which is about how people pay more attention to the message versus the source in a high involvement situation. Conversely, in a low involvement situation, people tend to rely on peripheral cues about the source of the messaging. Fourthly, editorial has a stronger impact on credibility when it was about low involvement product in a study that was done by Hallahan. And lastly, argument quality. For stronger arguments, earned media performs equally as well as advertising. But for weak arguments, advertising performs better. So these are the key takeaways that we felt underpinned the findings in this area. Our major takeaway from the academic research, frankly, is that there is limited support for the claim that public relations or earned media is more credible and more effective than advertising. So where does that leave us? So, yeah, exactly. So what's the rationale for our study? Why are we doing this? Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Sorry, we're in the wrong audience here. So we all know the media landscape is evolving. Social media and digital applications and mobile applications mean that we can access information and data in many formats and in many venues. The emergence of native advertising, the transformation of traditional media continues as it tries to push out content through all of those different channels. And this leaves consumers searching for information in a totally new way. Consumers are choosing their own channels, they're choosing the feeds that they want to receive that information. So and they're doing it across all of the so the paid, the earned, the social, and the owned channels. They're making their own decisions, making their own choices. So the reason we feel that this study is important and we want to revisit the topic of source effectiveness and credibility is because of this changing environment, and we want to investigate it across this whole popular PESO concept of paid, earned, social, and owned.
Now for the results of the study. As Marianne mentioned, we had 1,500 participants complete this project in August of 2015. You can see here a very nice representation on all the the key variables that we were looking at in terms of gender, ethnicity, education, age, and income. And so going back to the original purpose of this research project, the first question we were looking at is what sources do people consult when making a product purchase decision, both for a lower end product, a less expensive product compared to high end. So here's kind of the first slot of numbers up here, the first set of data. Where are people turning to for their information for product purchase decisions? I think there's a couple of important takeaways here. The first is that people are consulting a variety of sources quite frequently. Second, the one that's used the least often, and this is probably not too surprising, is native advertising. And the source that's used the most often when looking for product information for routine is online reviews written by other consumers. When we go ahead to the next slide here is for a high-end product, when you're spending more money and more time. Do we see anything different with these numbers compared to the lower-end products? And the difference is they're spending more time with all the sources. All the numbers go up for all sources consulted. But in a similar vein, again, native advertising is the least used, and the online product reviews are consulted the most. As we oftentimes talk about to our clients and to our students, the lines between the media channels, they're blurring with content marketing, brand journalism, native advertising. Those lines are definitely blurring. And people don't probably necessarily know where they're receiving information, and frankly, probably don't really care to some degree, depending on the issue, of course. And as long as people feel that they're receiving value in the information that they receive, no matter what the source is, they're probably going to pay attention and look at what you have to say. And so moving forward, I think it's more important for us to think SBR practitioners to focus less on source placement and to focus more about the quality of the message that we have. And that's really what public relations is all about. Thanks.